Before I ever met him, I remember how Anne, John, and I were sprinting through a forest, and only now do I realize and understand that it was him all along who was whispering to us, revealing to us the way to stop the machines. It was raining that day. I remember feeling so afraid and so tired of sprinting. The machines were chasing after us, but they were far behind and out of sight. Nonetheless, they were seeking us out in order to kill us. I knew so. And so did Anne and John. Thus we struggled onwards. Running alongside each other, we were breathing rapidly and beginning to run out of breath. But it was just around the corner. A place. A place full of cobwebs and computers. I slipped on the mud and fell down. I fell forward into the mud, but Anne and John helped me back up, and we continued. John's eyes were bright green. His face's structure converged into a point. His body was slender and sharp, suited primarily for intense speed. His tail was long, about the size of the rest of his body. Anne was much like him, except her eyes were bright yellow like gold, and the both of them had unique colors across their feathers. Light brown and white feathers on John, and black feathers on Anne. At the time, I was not so sure what my colors were, especially my eyes. But my arms and legs' feathers were black with white streaks and spots, I saw. My name was Zion. I was born thousands and thousands of years after the death of Henry Goldman. But of course, at the time I had no idea that such a person ever existed. No one named us. We gave ourselves those names. For after we had escaped from the hellhole we were trapped in, we soon found traces of the human race. We found abandoned houses, cars, trucks, and other buildings, and a library. It was the library where we found the names. Ancient names. Beautiful names, we thought. The letters and their meanings. We spent many months exploring that library, and we learned so much about an ancient, extinct species, and so much about ourselves and the world. It was the human race that wrought their own extinction. They were annihilated by the machines. But before we discovered Earth, as the humans called it, John, Anne, and I had been prisoners along with myriads of others, trapped inside a place where the lights never go out. We were but minuscule drops in a vast ocean of individuals, all crammed together and spanning for as far as the eye can see. I once felt as if that was all that existed. An ocean of individuals, all lost, confused, and in pain just like me, all crying out and searching for some meaning behind it all, and never seeming to find it. Waiting in a place where time is still, for relief from a persisting feeling of repulsion of all of that sorrow and suffering, and never finding it until the day of death. Wretched endless weeks of misery and irritation. There was a lingering stench of a hot, foul odor that rose up from the floor. My eyes were always burning. There was no sleep, and the air was full of hatred and the sound of daunting, dreadful misery. We spent so much time there, just suffering, the thousands of us trapped in that place. And then there were the machines. They were terrifying to say the least. They had 2 legs that stuck out from their base and stomped on the ground. They had 4 arms with 2 just a bit above the other 2, and their colors were always just black and white. They towered over us all in height. To be in their shadow was a repulsing feeling, but it was not their appearance that struck fear in our hearts. It was the things they did to us. It was the way they treated us. That was what sparked in us hatred and fear of them. When a few of us finally escaped from that place, we saw a beautiful light in an awesome, infinite sky. It shone down upon us, giving us feelings that we had never known before. And the few of us who had slipped through the cracks and had managed to become free from that prison ran away, hoping to never return again. About 8 years after discovering the library, the 3 of us felt that we should go back to the gates of hell, and set free the others whom we had left behind. So using ideas that we got from some of the things that we saw in that library, the 3 of us came up with what we thought was a brilliant strategy for setting all of the others free from those tyrannical machines. Sadly, it did not work. We managed to free a few, but it was not enough. The storm above was beginning to get really loud. Every few seconds a crack of thunder would blast and the rain was falling even harder. The winds were becoming like whips. Our feathers were all smeared in some way by the mud we were struggling to get past, and yet we continued running as fast as we could. We felt that something was beyond that forest, just a bit beyond it, and at some point I looked back and saw machines sprinting towards us. Tears began to fall from my eyes as the three of us sprinted desperately towards God knew what. Afraid of pain, afraid of dying, afraid of losing Anne and John. As we could then hear the stomping of the machine's legs nearing closer to us, I knew that the three of us were thinking that maybe we were just going crazy, that the place we kept seeing and having visions of was non-existent. Boom, 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 with those monsters just a distance away from us, rushing to capture us and slay us or drag us back to hell. The three of us thought that maybe our minds had broken, that we had gone insane. We were beginning to despair that the place full of cobwebs and computers, and that the words we kept hearing were hallucinations. But then we saw it. When the trees of the forest were behind us, along with the mud, and when we had reached the peak of a hill, we saw what we were looking for, and we almost couldn't believe our eyes. With the machines still stomping towards us, John, Anne, and I shot forward so full of hope. We crossed the distance and scampered into the facility just in time to shut out the machines. We figured out how to lock the door, and then we searched around for a really big computer. When we finally found it, buried amongst the cobwebs, we cleaned it up and turned it on, and the machines were now pounding terrifyingly at the metal door, trying to break it down. We struggled for many minutes trying to understand how to navigate the computer. And lo, we typed the name we kept hearing over and over again being whispered into our thoughts. Henry_Goldman. We entered convoluted clusters of letters as a password, and it worked. We searched for and found the file we had been seeing in our visions. The metal doors were broken down by the machines, and in a short, stressful struggle, we listened to the voice intently, the voice I now know as Henry's voice, and we installed the program. And just as the three of us fell out of the large chair, trying to avoid being snatched by the machine's outstretched arm, it suddenly stopped. Petrified and hidden beneath the desk, we stared for what felt like an eternity in horrifying silence. They stood there before us. I had no idea what they were thinking, but it looked like they were thinking deeply. All I could do was stare in anticipation. And then they looked at us. They said something in a gentle tone that we didn't understand, made a meaningful gesture, and then left. In the library, we soon learned that what they said was, "Forgive me."